Jordan's background is fantastic.
You look fine. You look good.
Thank you.
All right, let's see.
That's good.
All right. Jordan Sheridan live Monday, August 30th, 2021. I did say trigger warning in this headline because I do know facts are very, in these times, facts, science, data really ruffle some feathers, and everyone is an armchair doctor these days. Smash the like button. Let's get this out to more people. I think this is going to be an important stream because honestly, not that I or my wonderful guest here, Walker, not that we by ourselves could save lives, but at least we could talk about what are very blinking red light, obvious things that unfortunately, I think people who have a healthy distrust with the government are conflating that healthy distrust with the government with science and data. So a lot to talk about. Please smash that like button. Also, share the live stream if you can. More people that like, share, the more people that will see this. We're also going to have Jen Perlman join us in a little bit. Jen ran for Congress down in Florida against Debbie Wasserman Schultz last year during the pandemic. She lost, but we wanted to have her on because in addition to me and Walker and I talking bigger picture about the national numbers of COVID, right now, Florida is worse than most countries. And Jen lives in Florida. And the Florida's governor, who to me could be the next president if he makes it out as winning governor again. He's clearly a Trump mini-me, only it seems alarmingly even more crazy than Trump. He left Florida to go do a big dollar donor, a fundraiser in New Jersey while hospitals are overrun. So without further ado, Walker Bragman of the Daily Poster, which has been doing great work. Walker does a lot of kind of the dirty work, following who's donating to who, financial influence, money in politics. He's also done a hell of a lot recently, which I want to talk to you about the iceberg known as redistricting and the census, which is getting very little media attention, but will very much control which minority party maintains power in this country, even though they can't win majorities. But Walker, I wanted to have you on because you've been very, very just clear, despite it getting a lot of pushback, that schools should not reopen right now. Frankly, we should have a lockdown in this country, maybe not exactly the same as New Zealand, but very severe, that we're heading towards a place where today it's Delta, but it's going to mutate and mutate if we don't stop the spread radically. And you've challenged people who, in my view, are pushing false equivalencies, red herrings, comparing coronavirus deaths as no more significant than car accident deaths annually and all these things. So I wanted to ask you, just big picture, what are you seeing that many others that we might think have done some good journalism aren't seeing?
So first of all, thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure when you and I get to hang out and chat. And I love the work that you guys do. You've done some great stuff in Flint, and you've stayed on that story. So it's a really important story. People should absolutely be paying more attention to it. So I really commend the work that you do, and it's a pleasure to be on here and to get to chat with you. To the COVID situation, yeah, I've talked to a number of epidemiologists at this point, and all the news that I'm hearing is just bleak. The biggest issues that they have are, we have this individualistic approach to this pandemic, right? Like the federal government has basically taken a hands-off approach and said, states, you're in charge of the mitigation. That's on you. And the private sector will incentivize you to do sort of the right thing and hope that works. And that strategy just hasn't worked. I mean, and it's typical. Like that is a neoliberal strategy, right? Like the federal government doesn't really have a role. Leave it to the states. Leave it to the private sector. That's neoliberalism in a nutshell. Um, and and public-private partnerships are a big part of that as well. And that's also a part of the COVID response. Like a lot of the vaccination efforts now have been turned over to private firms. The Washington Post had that story. So essentially, the foundational argument that I make, and I think that a lot of people, not just me, but a lot of sort of folks who are conscious of what's happening are making, is that this virus, as it spreads, it mutates. And so the more spread you have, the more chance it has to mutate. Who knows if Delta is going to be the worst we see, or if Delta is, just the beginning of something. Like, if we let this thing spread, we're taking a gamble, and also killing people. That's the other side of it. So I'd like to see the federal government pay people to stay home, close all non-essential businesses, give essential workers hazard pay, allow them, give them, in addition to the money that they'd be getting, you don't have to go to work if you're not comfortable. Like, we need a coordinated federal response. Supplies delivered to every household, masks, door-to-door vaccinations, like that sort of response. And there is a resistance to that, just sort of viscerally, among a lot of people in the U.S. right now, because even people on the left, because you have this culture it's very individualistic. For the last 40 years, the dominant political culture has been neoliberal. Any sort of government action is seen sort of as overreach, and that's a real issue. I mean, the folks who are like up in arms and saying no more lockdowns, like, they'd freak the hell out if they were around during the FDR times. We passed a law during the Great Depression that limited how much farmers could grow, like how crops they could grow on their own property. Can you imagine that today? Like, no, you can't tell me how much. It's like, but we're in a national crisis, right? Like, the Great Depression was a national crisis. We had to stabilize the economy. So you have the Agricultural Adjustment Act. Today, we have a national crisis. It's killed 600,000+, maybe 1 million people, depending on whose number. I mean, we're massively undercounting. That's general consensus among the healthcare field. So 1 million dead Americans, maybe, right. 900,000. So yeah, that's sort of where I'm at. I view it as it really is a revealing moment about what you think the role of government needs to be.
And go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, if you think that government needs to take a more active role in society, needs to do things like provide health care for everybody, needs to do, that sort of mentality fundamentally is at odds with the anti-lockdown sentiment in my mind.
I think there's two things I want to get your thoughts on. And I think people need to step back for a second from whatever their fixed position is, not just on COVID, but a lot of things in America. And number one, you need to realize right now in Florida, besides this disastrous hurricane in Louisiana, and we're thinking about people suffering with that. I just spoke with someone who says their power is probably going to be out for 3 weeks. Florida, Louisiana, Arkansas, Alabama, Georgia. So this southern region, right now, pediatric hospital beds are filling up. Like, children's hospital beds are filling up. Right now, you're seeing more stories about people without COVID, whatever it be, heart attacks, other health issues, some urgent, some not, that cannot get hospital beds, cannot get treated. I don't know the data, but we'll find out how many people died unrelated to COVID that could not get access.
Yeah, car accident victims.
Right. In this case, literal access. I hate the word access in healthcare, but access to a bed. Right now, you have schools reopening, and I think, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. What Glenn Greenwald and a lot of other people maybe don't realize, because full disclosure, I'm not a parent. Walker's not a parent yet. So for certain things, of course, we don't want to presume what having a child is like or the damage to children with COVID. But you also shouldn't presume that the long-term effects to children of COVID. I'm not talking about
Well, let's throw a
I'm not
statistic
talking
out
about
there.
missing schools. I'm talking about you don't know for children whose cognitively are still developing, their bodies are still developing, getting this contagious virus. We don't even know yet fully in adults the full effects of long-term effects. So to merely focus on, well, we should reopen schools because less people are going to die, less children will die than car accidents. Well, sure. I mean, technically, although we don't know yet if more children will start dying, but it's not just about death. It's about if
Long
you're
COVID.
if you're worried about the long-term effects to children losing their socialization, not being in school, development, whatever. Well, are you, Dr. Greenwald and others, do you know what the long-term effects are of them to physically or mentally of having COVID? Your thoughts?
Well, 1 in 10 kids, according to a recent study, 1 in 10 um, have some lasting symptom from COVID that lasts 5 weeks beyond. That's what we would call, I guess, long COVID. It's not really understood, as you were saying. We don't really understand it fully. We just kind of know it's bad and it's avoidable. Like, look, we're passing an infrastructure bill right now. We're worrying about this, this major infrastructure bill. Why aren't people like up in arms about the fact that it's not going to pour money into like making virtual learning more viable? Like, I get it. Like the push to reopen schools is like overwhelmingly from white parents. It's overwhelmingly white parents, and that's a hard thing to like get past because it's kind of feels a little bit like, okay, you need your me time. I get it. It's hard. It's hard to have kids around all the time. I get it. But throwing your kids into a petri dish just doesn't seem like the right answer, right? Like it's hard to grapple with the fact that it's coming from primarily more affluent families, and they're the ones who are used to being okay if something goes wrong.
And I also think, and this goes beyond children to just everybody, people need to stop. And I'm talking about journalists pretending they know everything about this. I mean, I've seen journalists that I respect, or at least used to respect, posting articles of like one-off doctors in Sweden saying
Yeah.
something, which is the definition of journalists are drawing their own conclusions and then trying to find facts to support it, which is not journalism, it's propaganda. This is what propaganda is. You've made your determination. You've made, like, for example, for me on Flint, I mean, I knew the governor and his administration were covering this up, but I didn't have the evidence yet. So instead of ranting and raving that this is a cover up, I found the evidence and then I ranted and raved following that. But
Right.
I see journalists I respect and all of these kind of, whether it be commentators or just tweeters, sure, you could have opinions, but you citing like offshoot studies about ivermectin and the possibility that that might help in some ways. There's no foolproof data that it does. There's a lot of data that it has adverse health effects in humans, or you citing that masks don't work because of one study here or this and that. The truth is, the experts don't even know everything, and you don't know everything. So when you in a ocean of we don't know everything, the data is continually unfolding. We're not also at this point. You have less time to know because it's not COVID-19 anymore you're dealing with. It's the variant, the Delta variant, which we have less.
Which has like 1,000 times the viral load.
Right. So
It's
my
it's
whole
it's like a different virus.
my whole point is, I don't know, Walker, we don't have kids, but I think we could say this. If we were walking around,
You have a
and
respiratory system, don't you, Jordan?
I do, and I have
Right,
asthma. I have
right,
asthma
yeah.
now, which I didn't before.
So yeah, that counts.
But if you had kids and I had kids and we're walking our kids and we're about to go into a building, I don't know, a community center, and we see kind of one side of the building seems kind of sideways, and you see pieces of brick falling off, you probably wouldn't walk into the building, right? Because you want to protect your children, and there's too much unknown there in terms of the structure of the building. Yet send your kids in because more people die of car accidents a year. I mean, I just don't get it. It seems to be, if all of us could just agree on one thing, we don't know everything, then if we're in a sea of unknown, you should take extra caution.
Right. Our public health response to this crisis, this very real crisis that's killed hundreds of thousands of Americans, should be guided by our most protective impulses. And they found there is a study, to cite a one-off study here, there is a study of countries that adopted elimination strategies versus those that did not. And the countries that adopted elimination strategies saw less disruptions to their day-to-day lives overall than those that have tried suppression. And that's like, look, New Zealand most of the time is fine. They're having an outbreak now. They're going to lock down. They're going to get it controlled, and they're going to reopen, and it's going to be back to life as usual until there's another outbreak. But like we're having like 1,000 deaths a day. They've had less than 1,000 overall. And like, yeah, you can say, oh, New Zealand is a smaller country, but we're talking about like per capita too, per like 100,000, they're still doing way better than us. Hell, Montana has like a smaller population and they're doing way worse. It's just our COVID response has been abysmal. Frankly, it's been guided by what's best for business. Keeping the country open, that's what's best for business. There's a reason the Chamber of Commerce opposes lockdowns. Incidentally, Chamber of Commerce and Greenwald on the same fucking side. Interesting.
Well, what I find incredible, because there's a lot of people who legitimately think that this is big pharma trying to inject you with microchips or track you or whatever the hell. But from a very fundamental level, it was very clear to me from the beginning. I don't even think necessarily government officials, whatever, want you to be vaccinated purely for great motives. We want a healthy society. Sure, they probably don't want you to die en masse, but Trump, Biden, well, the donors were setting the whole response from the beginning. Trump was being begged by the donors not to close the economy and this and that because they only care about the next quarter. They don't care about the future. I give you the climate catastrophe. So yeah. Trump was being influenced from the beginning, Walker. And then you have Biden who came in, who against science in many ways has, it's been a better response than Trump, but with people, I'm not for a national mandate, but he sure has taken his time supporting lesser levels than a mandate. I'm absolutely for, if you're not vaccinated, no, you shouldn't fly. If you're not vaccinated, no, you shouldn't get on a train. It's common sense. And as Saul Alinsky, the boogeyman, Saul Alinsky, who wrote Rules for Radicals, once said, people cannot be free unless they are willing to sacrifice some of their interests to guarantee the freedom of others. Period. Freedom is not, let me say that again. People cannot be free unless they are willing to sacrifice some of their interests to guarantee the freedoms of others. So I've had people in my life, Walker, say, well, what do you care if you're vaccinated? Well, I care because you being unvaccinated, A, could get me COVID again. I already have long-term symptoms from COVID. Maybe I won't die, but I don't really want to get sick again. B, I care because you could kill my unvaccinated niece and nephew if you ever come in contact with them. And C, I'd like this to be over from practical reasons. A big part of my news is traveling, and I don't want to be traveling for the next 5 to 10 years through a contagion cesspool. But it seems to me people, and it's the same with the gun debate, but people truly believe that for their freedom, they have a right to basically kill anyone.
To do whatever. Path. No, right. I totally. This is my biggest, gripe about this whole issue. It's like, your freedom does not extend to putting other people's lives at willful risk. Like that's, and anybody, and I don't mean to, single out Greenwald here, but he's a lawyer. He's a former constitutional scholar. Dude, that's not how our Constitution works. It was ever intended to work. This libertarian streak is just, it's fucking childish, man. It's like it's like dealing with I was reading an article about this recently. Somebody wrote that it was like the libertarian high school debate captain, and that's exactly what it is. It's like it's that's not how society functions, and that's not how our country has functioned ever. This whole like rugged individualism where like, oh, toughen up and get your, deal with it, and oh, I can do what I want to do, you do what you want to do, and then don't bother me. Like, this is Reagan's America, very much still Reagan's America, and people are influenced by that, whether or not they realize it. On the left, on the right, it's bad. It's really bad. Like, he shredded the social contract that was established, in blood in the 1930s, in the wake of the Great Depression and the advent of World War II. Like, we built our middle class. We built this country through collective, sort of a collective-minded public sector. And now it's sort of like you're on your own. Reagan's 9 most terrifying words in the English language. I'm from the government, and I'm here to help. Well, 600,000 Americans dead later, it turns out that the scariest words in the English language are actually, I'm from the government and you're on your own.
Right.
Like we're in a national crisis. We have got to be able to address that national crisis as a country. Our federal government has got to have the power to solve this COVID crisis. And if it doesn't, it sets a hell of a precedent to deal with climate change.
Well, with climate change, there's no vaccine, there's no masks. Once it's too late, it's too late. And frankly, it's already too late to a certain degree. But with this, there are safety measures that can be taken. And I also want to say to the naysayers, I'm not proposing we shut down schools for the next 3 years. I don't think you are either. I'm not proposing we shut down society for the next 3 years. But if you look at what South Korea did, for example, when there was no vaccine.
The next 3 months.
Right. When you look at what South Korea did, they had testing from the beginning. We did not. Now we do. And they had a rigid, not a full lockdown, but they had strict separation of people with testing, and it went dramatically down. Now, when you look at New Zealand responding this way, where they shut things down when there's one case, people are saying, oh my God, this is, dystopian, this and that. Well, COVID has not been an actual pandemic for the most part for them, because each time there is one case, it's like kind of like a maintenance system. All right, we're going to close things down for a week or two, get it down, and then we can resume back to life.
Right.
I mean, I think in our circumstance, with calls for that, we need to also demand that our government not, kicks the can down the road with rent, but cancels it. They pay for it while they are telling citizens to stay home.
And pay people. You can't lock down without paying people. It's just it's that simple. You cannot do it. You need to pay people in order to do this. But it requires, Jordan, again, this major shift, this reevaluation in the role of our federal government. And I really think that this is something that people on the look, you could have had epidemiologists on to talk about the virus and the science behind it, and I highly recommend that you do that, because I think that would be beneficial for your audience. We're talking now about like just basic stuff that these I thought that this stuff was like accepted on the left. Like, yes, we need an interventionist government that will, intervene in the economy and make things right for people and make life generally better and not take a backseat to the private sector. I thought that was like just basic, like progressive politics. And it's very disheartening to see this sort of streak on the among some on the progressive left that is like, no, there's any emergency measures to control the pandemic are draconian. Like the total death toll in Montana is like 1,800 for COVID. And that's a sparsely populated state. It's 147,000 square miles. New Zealand, population of 5 million compared to the 1 million in Montana, they've had like 30 deaths in total. And they're a smaller space. It's 103,000 square miles. Like this, you can see the tangible difference in policy between looking at this country versus a country that had a unified federal, national response. I don't want to say federal. They don't have a federal system, but a unified national response where the government stepped in and said, we're going to make sure that we're going to pay people to stay home. They haven't done it perfectly. The inequality has also grown in Sweden. That's not good. Or it's not Sweden, New Zealand. That's not good. But overall, their pandemic response is so much better than ours. They have avoided mass death. They've done everything they can to avoid mass death. I think that's a good thing. I'm a huge proponent of Medicare for all and stuff like that because I think it will help, prevent mass death. And this is one of those policies. If you're against this, like, you can look and see your alternative in action right now. What Biden is doing right now, that's the alternative.
Right. And I want to show the numbers here to really just, frankly, put to bed this bullshit right wing, but more people die in car accidents. Colin, if you could put this up. This is just, it wasn't hard to find this, but when people have said, well, more people die in car accidents per year than children dying, or some people have made the argument more people die of car accidents than just period people die of COVID. If you have that graphic, Colin must have stepped to the PP. Oh, there you go. So 1 year, that's car crash deaths. That's 2020 was, I think, 38,000 car accident deaths in the U.S. Here's 1 week. This was the last 7 days, over 9,000 deaths. I failed math, Walker, but I think if in 7 days.
But Jordan, the blue block is bigger than the red block.
But that's 1 year. This is 1 week. And then you have 1 month.
Oh my God.
This is 1 month. 36,000 deaths from COVID. 1 year of car accidents. So first of all, by the way, this car accident thing, it's a right-wing argument they use after mass shootings, by the way. So,
and it's an argument that Glenn knows is bullshit because a year ago he was explaining to someone why it was bullshit. Like, come on.
Well, he would say that was before there was a vaccine. But the thing is,
but hang on. The conditions that the problems with the argument that he lays out, that COVID grows sort of that hasn't changed. That shit hasn't changed. Yeah, we have the vaccine now, but we're still seeing a wave that's comparable or worse than the wave during over the winter. Like, this is bad. We're still in the darkest days. The Louisiana hospitals are still seeing the darkest days. That was a headline like 3 weeks ago. I mean, it's just. People are dying all over this country from this very preventable, virus.
Right.
Well, we're not doing anything to stop it.
I also want to point out, and this isn't specific to Glenn, but he wrote it, but this is a widespread thought. He said, I really don't understand what you think gives you the right to impose your own irrational judgments about safety and risks on other people's children. Well, you're doing that.
Yeah.
So in his view, and by the way, again, it's not, I respect the journalism Glenn has done. I don't respect some of the things he's been tweeting recently, but he's saying, who are you? This was to Walker and me on Twitter. Who are you to impose your irrational judgments about safety and risks on other people's children? Well, first of all,
rationality king.
It's your opinion that we're being irrational, just like it's our opinion you're being reckless. But you're telling others not to impose their judgments on other people's children's, but you're saying, because in your judgment, the risk to children's development of not being in person in school is worth sending them back now in a contagion box, that would be you imposing, whether it's rational or not, your judgments on other people's children. And by the way, it's not so simple as I don't know if he pointed this out, but other people said this. Well, if you're scared, keep your children at home. Well, for most Americans, it's not so simple, right? So if you keep your kids at home, where's the child care?
A lot of schools aren't even offering remote options anymore. Like this is, it's great. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't. Our pandemic response doesn't make sense. And we're trying to balance sort of this extremist individual perspective, like viewpoint, I guess, that exists out there that policymakers think is so dominant, against policies that actually, when you poll Americans, aren't unpopular. Sorry, I have a cat in the room and just knocked something over. So that's what that was. So everything is okay.
Gene said that was a completely confused and run-on sentence. Say again, please. So again, I'm not trying to make this about Glenn, but he tweeted out, "Who are you?" meaning who am I, and Walker, because he was in that thread, to impose our, quote, irrational judgments on risks to children onto other people's children. So I was pointing at, meaning, who are you to tell other parents close the schools and affect their children's development by your own irrational judgments? So my point was, but you're doing that only the opposite way. So right. He might think his judgments are rational. I don't. I think they're just right-wing talking points.
Dude, he tweeted out in May 2020, he tweeted, unlike car accidents or heart attacks where the death rate is stable, the number of deaths increases virtually every day, sometimes exponentially with no end in sight. Well, guess what? That's exactly what we're seeing right now. No end in sight, sometimes exponential growth. Like, yeah, it hasn't changed. Nothing has changed except, I don't know. He's changed.
But I want to also point out, Walker, and then I'm going to play a video that's going to make you crazy. This is not just about children's safety, okay? Because again, to him and others, it's not just about, will children die or live if they go to school? Right now, there's less children dying than adults. Death is not the only measure, as we've already talked about. We don't know the long-term effects. You want to talk about costs of the healthcare system? Wait, if children have long-term effects, how much that's going to cost the healthcare system, not to mention the human effects on destroying our future generation. But putting that aside, you send kids into this contagion box, they're bringing it home to their adult parents, to their adult grandparents, to, if they're in the community, other adults. Those adults might be unvaccinated, those adults might be vaccinated, and they did the responsible thing, but they get sick again. Fortunately, by and large, the overwhelming majority of vaccinated cases are not leading to even hospitalizations nor death. But the point is, I, for example, I'm 34. I have asthma now after having COVID. I made off a lot better than my partner, Jen, who has severe long haul symptoms, but I'm coughing all the time. And I've taken steroids. I've taken, not steroids to build muscle, steroids to get rid of it. I'm on 2 inhalers. Well, if I get COVID again, how's that going to affect my asthma? Is it going to make it worse? Am I going to have other secondary illnesses? The other thing is, you mentioned, Walker, that we need to start rethinking the role of government. I think we also need to start rethinking our mentality as Americans, not just the role of government. Because I know, 1980s shifted our thinking, greed is good. But at the end of the day, there's a whole lot of people that were clapping at 7 o'clock in New York City during the beginning of this pandemic for the doctors and the nurses. It became this ritual, at least in New York City, to clap.
Yep, I remember that.
To clap at 7 o'clock. There's a whole lot of those people that won't get vaccinated now or won't wear masks because it's become there is the human element of we're burnt out. We want to go back to normal. But back then, they were all part of the we that we're in this together. But suddenly, they're listening to anti-vaxxers who are against all vaccines, not just the COVID vaccine, many of whom, by the way, were vaccinated as children. And now it's my freedom. Don't tread on me. Don't segregate society. I think we need to all start thinking. Obviously, this country is built on self-interest. Capitalism is basically about I'll get mine. Good luck to you. But when it's called life or death, yeah, it's not really your freedom. It's not freedom means individual freedom, but you're threatening other people's freedom, as we've discussed, Walker.
Yeah, and look, there are a lot of people in this country who can't get vaccinated for medical reasons, and we put them at risk when the people who can get vaccinated,
including many residents I know in Flint, Michigan,
don't get vaccinations or people who get vaccinated and they don't, the vaccines don't take or whatever, they don't get the full benefit of the vaccine. It's on everyone else to make sure that life is livable for those people and that they're not at risk just in their day-to-day. This is just basic. We live in a society. We live in a society. It is not every man for himself. And that mentality doesn't work. It creates a disorganized, pandemic response where every state is a different set of rules and there's no coordination and hundreds of thousands of people are dying in the span of a year. That's crazy. That is just it's absolutely it's infuriating.
Hey,
it really is.
Colin, put up that chart one more time so we could really just smack it in the face of these people. That's how many people died of a car accident last year. 38,000. So many COVID deaths the last 7 days. So if you don't know the numbers, 38,000 on the blue, this is over 9,000. So that's 1 week. Then take it to the other graph, Colin. 1 month. That would be 36,000. So 1 month is almost at the 1 year death count for car accidents. Secondly, just common sense. I don't even understand why I have to say this, because a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist would understand this. Car accidents are not contagious. They're confined to the one driver, the two drivers, the multi-car pileup. That's it. It's not, somebody I read somewhere said this would be like equating it to there's a chip in one car that the government or someone evil is, pulling to lead you to death, that it then through the car's digital system is spreading it to other cars, which is obviously technically could happen, I guess. But the truth is, Walker, if for whatever reason there was this explosion in car accidents to the point where hospitals are being overrun with car accidents, I think we'd probably do something.
Yeah.
And the
best comment on this was I got in a car accident last week and my grandma came to visit and then she caught the accident. It doesn't oh God, it's a stupid argument. It really is. And not to, look, we're at this point, I don't
just care. Stupid, Walker. Let's just call it what it is. It's dangerous.
It's
people
inhumane.
With very large followings are putting out contrarianism, basically, under the guise of morality. How we're destroying our children's lives and their development. Well, the key word is their lives.
But who are they being contrarian to? They're totally in line with the mainstream discourse on this. They're in line with the Jennifer Rubins of the world and the people who want to see schools open. That Professor Emily Oster in the Atlantic. You're not. I don't know. There's this, and I do find it a little ridiculous because their audience is when you challenge that, they're like, oh, you're just repeating these mainstream talking points. It's dude, have you looked at the mainstream discourse on school reopenings? The president of the United States wants to do it. His allies in media are pushing it. There's been people who want to keep schools closed, I think, are sort of on the outskirts of the discourse right now. That may be changing as the virus, spreads, but I don't know. It just,
and I want to play this. I want to play this video, and we'll respond to it. Buckle up if you haven't eaten, folks.
I think it's insane. This is furtherance of what has become effectively a police COVID state around schools, and it doesn't make any sense.
Well, listen, Ainsley, the pandemic may be far from over, but the emergency certainly is, as we have now hit an all-time low for daily deaths, new cases, as well as hospitalizations. We have gotten to a level of acceptable risk previously during bad flu years and other circulating respiratory viruses. Now that over 60% of U.S. adults have gotten at least one dose of that vaccine and it's being extended to adolescents, it's time to acknowledge the emergency is over and move forward, especially when it comes to young children. As we know, we have known for a while, but we continue to have more data that young children are less severely affected by this virus and they have a less risk of transmitting it.
We got a letter this morning. It was leaked from the Capitol Police that says they now will arrest our staffers or detain our staffers or force our staffers to put on masks. That is, Pelosi's no longer a benevolent dictator. She's a tyrant.
Let me bring in former NFL quarterback Jay Cutler. Jay, why are you against mask mandates in schools?
Thanks for having me on, Stuart. For numerous reasons. I think whenever we look at the statistics, the kids my age in elementary that I have in an elementary school, they're at the very bottom of the spectrum of kids that are people getting sick, that are getting hospitalized.
So now you're running for the school board in the school district where your youngsters are going to school. I take it you're doing that because you don't want any mask mandate in your school district, right?
Yeah, I don't want a mask mandate.
Watch what's coming. These mandates are against the Nuremberg codes. The first one states voluntary informed consent. Are you a Nazi?
We got parents looking at the bylaws. I plan on going in these school boards. Ian and other strong men. Men, where are you? Men, wake up, smell the coffee. Let's go. Make men great again, right? Make men men again. Let's go. Men, get going into these school boards and bringing data. You go into school boards to remove them. That's what you do. They don't follow the law. They don't follow the law. You go in and you remove them. I'm going in with 20 strong men. I'm going to speak in front of the school board, and I'm going to give them an option. They can leave or they can be removed.
There's so much to respond to there, but I would start with almost 1,300 people died yesterday. So that blonde-haired lady, in fairness, that was 3 weeks ago, so maybe she would think differently today. I doubt it. Said we're at an acceptable death level. Well, I don't think it's acceptable when 1,300 people die a day.
This is like, you remember when Romney was like, we got to run this country like a business. Acceptable death level. That's running it like a business. If you want to look at running this country like an actual functioning country, you look at countries that have adopted elimination strategies. That's running it like with public service in mind. That's how you protect people in a national crisis. Look, I did two fairly extensive pieces on sort of the push to reopen under Biden. One back in March, where I spoke to some epidemiologists, and they were like, yeah, look, it's spreading through kids now. This narrative that it's not is really bad. And it's every time it spreads, we risk mutation. We're risking a deadlier mutation. And that was back in March. The CDC released a study between April and June when Delta first arrived. And the second most common place where it spread? Schools. It spread through the schools. They were right. The epidemiologists I spoke to were right. Robert Morris and Deepti Gurdasani, they were absolutely right. And recently I was talking to a doctor friend of mine, and he's, he's got this practice detachment. He's a doctor, that's that you go through medical school, you learn to detach from all the suffering around you so that you can do your job. But he said at a certain point, the amount of deaths that are just happening, it's like, wow, that's a lot of death. Like, that's hard to deal with. We are putting unbelievable strain on our medical personnel in order to keep the country open. We're treating teachers as disposable. We're treating nurses and doctors as disposable, all so that business can be happy. That is really what is at stake here. We want to keep commercial, real estate happy in New York, so you got to send everybody back into the office. We want to keep companies, functioning and consuming. Everybody, you want to be consuming. Amazon did very well during lockdown. Some online retailers did very well, but that's a very limited look at it overall industry. So,
their workers didn't do very well. That's for sure.
Well, right. I'm not talking about it. I'm talking about the companies. That's different from how their workers are not treated well at all. And they should unionize. Right. But look, it's the reason that we're open is to keep capital happy. That's it. And anybody who tells you otherwise, it's not about freedom. It's not about, reasonable risk assessments and safety. It's about capital. And frankly, more people, I think, would be, sort of onto that if more people had access to doctors in this country, like could go to a doctor and had a doctor that they trust. I have several friends from back in the day who became doctors, so I've been able to, sort of talk to them throughout the pandemic, and they allay my concerns or they give me new ones, and that's sort of, but that's I'm fortunate in that sense, and but with our healthcare system, most people don't have it's hard to. I think there was this recent study that people with primary care physicians now that they go to, there's an alarming number of Americans who do not have a primary care physician.
Right.
So I think that has probably hindered our
And by the way, I want to bring in Jen Perlman, but before I do that, I want to also point out we've only talked about the government. I'm not going to say who. I mean, someone close to me, their work literally told them to come in today with COVID symptoms. This is not the first time I've heard this. Two people in this person I know's workplace have COVID, and this person I know is having symptoms, and their work told them to come in basically because they don't want to have to close early. This is not just happening in one hospital or one warehouse. I have been told my DMs are filled. I can't keep up with people who have told me how their workplace is being reckless, how their workplace is telling people, if you have COVID, don't even tell anyone. So it trickles down. If government's not going to do anything, trust me, business isn't going to do anything. I know corporations own the government, but in this case, the government has the power to do what is necessary, and they're refusing to. I wanted to also have Jen Perlman. How you doing, Jen? If I add you to the stream, there you are.
Hi.
So,
hi, Walker.
Hi, Jen. Good to see you again.
You too.
Jen Perlman ran against Debbie Wasserman Schultz, a champion of progressivism, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And, but you're in ground zero. I hate to say it. Florida is, I don't want to speak for, I'll let you say it, but Florida, from what I've read, is worse than many countries right now in terms of COVID. Children are in pediatric wards getting filled up. And new numbers that came out today, I'm trying to find it, that the vaccine, the effectiveness, specifically for older people, is now dipping between around 80% effective rather than 90% effective. Well, those older people are living in Florida, in large part. So I wanted to ask you, we're talking about irresponsible government.
Yeah.
You have a governor that I didn't know was possible, seems more extreme than even Trump. And while your hospitals are overrun, he's at New Jersey giving, favors to white donors this weekend.
Yeah, it's funny because I was just listening to what Walker was saying about that the only reason to keep everything open is just for commerce. But here's the thing, I have another reason for you. So what I think when we're watching Ron DeSantis, it's like watching a master class in political strategy, because really what he's doing, I think, is trying to lure away Trump supporters, because the reality is he's not going to please the people on the left here. He's not going to please the Democrat. And he's not running right now for 22. He already has that in the bag. He's running for 24. And I think that to him, a lot of what his strategy isn't about the policy. It isn't about anything. It isn't even about the money. It's about playing this game to, one, keep himself very relevant, and two, woo some of the Trump people that are still lingering with Trump in the Trump camp. And he can do that by this kind of nonsense, by threatening to, hold back their teachers and school board members' money and all of these things. It's just posturing. And so I think he's political strategizing.
Well, I'm not a Florida strategist, but I don't know if he has it in the bag in 2022 if he kills off half of Florida.
If you saw who the Democrats have, he's not, by the time that comes around, he'll be fine. Like, it'll all be water under the bridge. There is nobody in Florida in 22 that's going to win against him. Nobody right now. It's unfortunate.
I don't want to make this about Florida politics, but the truth is there's nothing being put in place in Florida to think that it would be totally or significantly better by fall of next year. We're heading into colder weather. I know that doesn't really apply to Florida, but nationwide, you're going to see cases go up. I know you have local school districts, that they just ruled in their favor, the Florida courts, that they can issue mask mandates, but, we don't know what DeSantis is going to be pushing at this point. So, we can't predict 6 months from now, let alone a year from now.
Right.
But I'm not sure it's going to get dramatically better in Florida, because in 6 months, it could be Lambda, it could be Theta, it could be,
but he'll change whatever his position is to suit whatever he needs to do at any given moment. And 6 months from now, he could be singing something completely different, and they'll sweep this under the rug. Right. It's just a game. Like, there's no, this is like Trump. There's no real personal position. There's no real caring about policy. It's all just how to sort of present yourself to who you need to at any given moment. That's what it seems like to me. He certainly isn't doing it out of welfare, and he isn't even doing it out of civil liberties. So, to me, it's just self-serving.
Right. And Walker, what do you see? Because Florida, I think, is a microcosm of everything we're talking about. I don't have the exact number, but I'm pretty sure at least half of the residents aren't vaccinated there, Jen.
I think it might even be less. I think we're towards the low end. I know that we're towards like the low end of the percentages.
Right. And by the way, I've lived in Florida. The school system is already a disaster in Florida without adding, this contagion. But I don't know. Politically, Walker, Trump mismanaging it is the reason he lost. Without a pandemic, I think Biden would have lost by a lot. Do you think somebody like DeSantis is smart politics?
So I think DeSantis has made a calculation that he thinks that this is smart politics, that, the numbers in Florida will reflect on some, not necessarily reflect on him, but may reflect on Biden because he's the president, and that's where, the buck stops here. It's hard to say. But what isn't difficult is to say that he is unleashing like biological warfare on his own population. Like, that's, not to be hyperbolic, but he's letting this virus spread and doing everything he can to prevent mitigation measures. That's like really brazen. And he's wrapping it. He's getting away with it among his base because he's wrapping it in this language of, liberty. It's our freedom. We appreciate freedom here. You're free. The only freedom you have in a state where your employer can call you into an unsafe workspace is the freedom to die for someone else's pocketbook. That's it. It's not, you're not more, I guess, of a man or more like whatever. You're not a better American for it. You're just dying for someone else to make money off of you. You're expendable. You're a piece of, of machinery that they can switch out with someone else who desperately needs the money and doesn't have the safety net or backing of to refuse that job. It's a cruel, brutal system. It has got to stop. We need a federal response to come in. In no world should DeSantis be able to do what he's doing. At this point, the federal government should be intervening in Florida, should be locking the state down. If need be, send in the National Guard, lock the state down, pay people to stay home, and be done with it.
That would be so ugly here. Oh my God. Like I'm picturing that, and I'm picturing like this, it would be like a civil war of Dixie flags outside my door. It would be crazy.
Look, we ended segregation. We sent the National Guard in to desegregate schools.
But what is it we're trying to do here? I mean, right now, I think a whole bunch of our districts have put in place mask mandates, and they're just having to deal with this litigation from the governor. So like in Broward, where we have a mask mandate. So all the kids in our schools are wearing masks. My kid had to wear a mask, like is wearing masks. So like, what would we do? Like, the people are, and that's why I also think that this is a lot more feckless than people realize, because I've always said this, Florida is a very county driven, similar to Texas in terms of governance. So a lot of things that happen or you talk about with our governor are not what's actually being applied on the ground. So it just depends on which county you're in.
Well,
that's the problem.
I think the bottom line is people need to separate government, big government and evil government, and not trusting government with like contagion. Because at this point, Jen, I mean, yeah, it doesn't spread as much outside, but you did see with spring break in Florida last year, you got people crammed on each other at beaches. It spread.
Oh, so, no, I don't leave. The only time I leave my house is to get into my car in my garage, drive my son to carpool and pick him up. Like I don't leave. I call it the fishbowl. And I have no intention on doing that.
Because to me, I don't really understand right now with the numbers in Florida, why restaurants you'd be able to go in. Why is it different than, in the early pandemic? Most places you had curbside pickup, those kind of things. I mean, the numbers are skyrocketing up. I understand what you're saying.
Maybe they'll shut it down. Maybe they will. I don't know. I mean, yeah. I don't know. But this is what it took last time. We were one of the last states to kind of like close things at all in the first place. So I don't know. I mean, maybe it will. Maybe they will. But now, of course, I just saw on the news today that this is the first day where there hasn't been an increase in the death toll. So they're kind of like trying to play up the numbers. But I don't know. But I know everything is open here. Like I said, I don't go, but everything is open, and yeah, you have a lot of people, and it's about masks is about half and half in the universe here. Yeah.
Well,
but people may survive, that like you may very well, like you could theoretically be somebody who goes and lives your life normally. You don't get the virus and you make it through, but there are literally hundreds of thousands of people in this country who have died from it already. And more who will die. In the next 3 months, they're expecting 100,000 deaths. That is not any one person's decision to make for someone else. You cannot make the decision whether somebody else lives or dies. That is not your call. So if you have to sacrifice a little bit, your daily routine, you don't get to go out, you don't get to go to your favorite bar at the end of the day. Okay, you know what? If it keeps your neighbor alive, that's a good thing. And that's a sacrifice. That's a sacrifice we should all be willing to make.
I wanted to ask you, Jen, you ran for Congress and you've seen kind of this emerging, whatever you want to call it, circular fire squad on the left. I see a lot of people that I know have brains, maybe subconsciously, if not conscious, conflating understandable distrust for the government with science and data. Because there's a lot of people that I used to respect or still respect, but are shocked by the stupidity they're putting out, that it seems to me based on, well, this is just Pfizer trying to make money, or this is just the government trying to control you, or, kind of this, in some cases, New World Order type of thinking, that it doesn't really seem to me to even be on the surface, literally about the vaccine or about the masks. It's about all of that pre-existing cynicism or suspicion or doubt they have, because a lot of these people, frankly, they're not all crazy right-wingers. They're people who believe in climate catastrophe, which is based on data and science. So to me, I mean, how do you reach people that it seems to me they've reached a conclusion first and are trying to find data to support it, which are often random articles from foreign countries of crackpot doctors, and say, see, this is the one example. How do you reach those people who it doesn't even seem like it's actually on the merits? It just seems, I don't trust the government. I don't trust the system, period.
I think that we all sort of understand that there are some people that we call TFGs, and that just exists in all of these circles. There are people that are just too far gone. Their skepticism has turned into paranoia. They sort of cross over to the dark side. What I think is interesting is that I think you named a few different scenarios that I actually do believe, right? So there is no doubt that this is a profit-driven situation, not whatsoever. But more than one thing can be true. So to not think about, and our government does lie to us. Okay,
Jen, I gotta stop you. More than one thing cannot be true on the new progressive left. There's no.
No. Not. I'm just talking about regarding the COVID scenario.
I was being sarcastic.
Oh, okay.
More than one thing cannot be true.
Right. Yeah. So what I'm saying is that, yes, our government lies to us. Yes, there's absolutely a profit motive to this. My husband, who is a physician, has been one of the first people to be vaccinated. He's, was one of the first people to turn to me and say, yeah, wait until this is an annual thing. We have to keep cards updated, and they laugh all the way to the bank. So more than one thing can be true. So is this necessary? Yeah. Is this a real science issue? Yes. That is all true. But so are the other things. The problem that those people have that are in such denial is they're not really people of science. They think they're people of science, but they're not, because people of science, like if you ever watch an interview with someone like Neil deGrasse Tyson, one of the first things he says is, as soon as something isn't true, you figure out what is. Like you don't just go with your conclusion. The whole idea is to look at incoming evidence and change as you go. Like that's actual science. These people, it's more political. So I would argue that people that are just doing that, they might just be too far gone. And I also do think there is a huge profit motive. There is a sense of disaster capitalism that is happening. There is a sense of taking away civil liberties that our government will always seize an opportunity to do so. Even when it might be warranted to some extent, they'll always push it further. That's what happened when we got the Patriot Act after 9/11. And so I do understand a certain amount of skepticism from people. But I also think that there is a scientific basis for the vaccine and so on and so forth. So I just think multiple things are true.
Right. Well, Walker, I think we could tie it. I don't know if you know this, Walker. So to the audience, breaking news. According to Biden and the government, the last plane carrying Americans from Afghanistan has departed. So they're basically declaring that the end of the war.
Mission accomplished.
Right. So I am old enough to remember we've kind of ended the war in Iraq 5 times. Every time it's over, we realize, oh, wait, we have 4,000 or 5,000 troops there. So I am, in this case, I'm not going to trust the government. I like so far rhetorically what Biden has said, but they're not talking about 16,000 private contractors that are probably staying there. We don't know how many advisors, they love to call them special advisors, they're going to keep in Afghanistan. So that I will be skeptical about, Walker. I think Biden deserves credit. I know that's a sin to say as a leftist.
I said it. I agree.
Yeah. But you could call a spade a spade. Sometimes Trump did good things from time to time. But in this case, I mean, I'm just looking at the data. Somebody mentioned, Jordan, you mistrust the government when it suits your narrative. This isn't a narrative. I'm just looking at the data. You would really have to assume, Walker, according to these people, that this data is fake. They're manipulating the data. They're manipulating the deaths. They're manipulating the demographics of who is more vulnerable. And all don't believe your lying eyes.
Right. Look, again, this is that I mentioned earlier that there's an alarming number of Americans without a primary care physician. I looked it up, a study from 2019, 45% of Americans between a certain age bracket don't have a primary care physician. That is a lot. That is a lot of people. People need to have, 18 to 29 don't have a primary care physician. Look, I have friends who are doctors. I have friends who are nurses who are going through this now, going through seeing the deaths, seeing what's happening. It's not a joke. It's very serious. It's frightening. It's a real crisis. This is a real crisis. And if we cannot act in the face of this very real crisis, we are not able to act in the face of anything. This is as real as it gets. This is as high as the stakes get. Hundreds of thousands of people have died, in the span of a year. People, my best friend in the world tells me all the time, people need something to be catastrophic, immediate, and inevitable in order to act. That's how we as humans act. This crisis should meet those criteria, whereas something like climate change doesn't. It's not immediate enough, but it's serious. It's devastating. We need a federal government capable of tackling something like COVID, and we will need that more going forward. With climate change. So
right.
That's sort of where I'm at. I'm just exasperated by the whole thing.
Right.
Talk to any medical professional, please. Just somebody who's working in an ER. Talk to them.
I also
about their experiences.
I also want to point out, because I saw somebody in the chat, Jordan, why have only people that agree with you on? Why not debate an anti-vaxxer? It's for the same reason I've always criticized cable news having climate deniers on. Some things aren't debatable.
It's like talking with a flat earther or a creationist. That's
right.
like, why would we give that credence?
Right. Some things are not debatable.
No.
And
why are you two so censorial? Why are you? Why do you want to censor what's?
The reality is the cases and deaths were plummeting in this country after people started getting vaccinated. That is the reality. You could pretend it's not, but the cases and the deaths were plummeting to the point where things were kind of sort of getting back to normal, other than the tenants who were fucked because this government left them to dry and get evicted, other than the people who lost their health insurance during. So everything was getting back to, I don't want to say normal, but better in terms of actual health. Economically, no. But, I'm not going to have somebody on just to say, here's the debate with people that are fucking pushing conspiracy theories and nonsense.
Why not invite on the QAnon people and have a nice discussion, or Pizzagate?
But I wanted to ask you, Jen, to me, something that is why I'm covering this today, and I haven't spoken about it much, but the thing is, everybody could, get into their bunker and, dig in more to their position. But if something doesn't change, like radically, meaning, yes, I'm going to say it, harsher measures to stop the spread, we're going to be talking about, this is going to be a thing for 5 years. This could be a thing for longer. This could be a thing where we're having a different mutation every 6 months, to the point where there is no vaccine. So we're not just talking about an acute crisis. We're talking about something that could become a permanent obstacle to living. I mean, I don't know what better way to say it. If we don't do something radical, and what I think needs to be done, I don't really believe in a mandate per se. I do believe if you're not going to get vaccinated, that's your choice. You shouldn't be able to fly. You shouldn't be able to take a bus. You shouldn't be able to take a train. You shouldn't be able to go into sporting events. And if you don't like it, too bad. I mean, you want to be free? Fine. But you can't go into crowded spaces because, as Walker said, you are a biological weapon. You just are. And you could be spreading this knowingly or unknowingly. I had a conversation with one of my best friends the other day who won't get the vaccine. I think his reasons are stupid. He's not a Trumper. I just think he's misinformed and dumb on this. And he's with his, I think, 12-year-old nephew all the time. And I said to him, I'm not trying to trigger you here, but would you be able to live with yourself if you gave your nephew COVID, even if he didn't die? And he said he started with the things, the misinformation about it's highly unlikely. I'm like, no, you're unvaccinated. He's unvaccinated. It's highly likely. And I don't want to say too much, but this friend of mine is around a lot of people all the time through his profession. So I just think we're not even talking about, if this continues, we're going to be talking about this for 5 years. It's going to be a permanent part of life. You're going to have God knows how many people, these starts and stops where schools will open, close, businesses open, close. then mixing the pandemic with the fucking inferno that is the climate catastrophe. So this isn't something that's just like, all right, people have fatigue. Well, think what you're going to have in 5 years when we're on to, I don't know, Gamma, whatever the variant then is.
Look, I want to get back to normal as quickly as possible. That's why I'm, my parents are older. I have friends who work in, schools. I have friends who work in, hospitals. I'm worried about the people that I care about. That's why I'm so adamant about, what's happening, and that we need like a bigger response. Look, if people aren't going to get vaccinated, then you have to take other measures to make sure that we're not spreading this virus. Look, if we had 100% vaccination, the virus could spread and it could mutate. It could still do all of those things, but it's a lot less likely. There have been billions of doses of these vaccines given out. They're not untested. They're safe. Go get vaccinated. Protect yourself and the people you care about. Like, stay out of the emergency room. Keep a bed open for someone who actually needs it. If it's the height of privilege to just be like, no, I don't think I will. Like, okay.
I think it's just selfishness. And I think that we live in a world, in a country where we don't think about the collective. We never think about the collective. We only think about ourselves generally. And our entire government is built accordingly. If we cared about the collective, we'd already have healthcare. We'd have a lot of things. So we just don't care about the collective. We are all about me, myself, and I got me, mine. And so that's a problem. And with the kind of stuff you're talking about is, to people in such an individualist, selfish place, is just, it's foreign. That's why it's so much easier in other countries to be able to do stuff like this. They have a stronger sense of collective.
And their governments aren't bought off by corporations.
Yeah, but even they care about each other. If you went up to the most conservative person in the UK, they still think that people are entitled to healthcare. Now they're trying to make some money off of it and privatize it, but it isn't this question as to whether or not people are entitled to it. Like, that's something that no other countries are not arguing about anymore.
Right. And James, calling people selfish? Absolutely, I'm calling people selfish. And if that triggers you, too bad. This whole like snowflakeism, like, oh, why are we trying to separate society? And, you're disrespecting me and we have to coddle the unvaccinated. If you're risking my niece and nephew's life, go fuck yourself. Seriously. If you're risking, my grandparents are dead, but if you're risking my family's life, or, I don't know, my immunocompromised wife or somebody like that, because of your freedom, what am I supposed to hand you tea? Yeah, that is selfish. And if you don't like it, go watch your fellow anti-vaxxers push misinformation.
But you know what? It's not. It shouldn't be up to it. Like, our pandemic response shouldn't be so weak that sentiment is a genuine risk, right? Like people don't want to get vaccinated. Fine. Guess what? We got to go back into a lockdown. Pay people to stay home. We should have a response to this pandemic that makes that kind of selfishness and nuttery irrelevant. Fucking irrelevant.
And I also want to point out, I'm not trying to go to battle with commenters, but there's a lot of misinformation that people have internalized that they're just pumping out, not because they're bad people, just because there's a lot of misinformation. So Bob said, well, that's a false argument considering the vaccinated population is still spreading the virus. Bob, first of all, the data shows the spread from vaccinated people is way less than from unvaccinated people. But more importantly, why do you think the vaccinated people are getting it again? It's because over half the country is not vaccinated. So, number one, that's not true that vaccinated people are spreading it equally to unvaccinated people. Secondly, no vaccine is 100% effective. That's just fact through history. And C, yeah, vaccinated people could spread it because they're recontracting it because, I don't know if it's you, Bob, but a lot of you in the chat will not get vaccinated. So I wanted to ask you, Jen, to me, I just think we're at a point now where it's very clear that for political reasons, economic reasons, whatever Biden's advisors are telling him, whatever Trump's advisors were telling him, that the number one thing is not public health. Because if it was, we wouldn't have had different state doing different things. Biden or Trump could have done executive orders. Frankly, in terms of capitalism, it's worse for the capitalists long term if this continues. If you just ripped off the Band-Aid, dramatically stop the spread, lock it down for whatever, 3 months, pay people, then you could resume your restaurants, bars, sporting events with no restrictions or relatively few restrictions. But to me, I think, if you are not going to get vaccinated, that's your freedom to do, but you don't then get the same privileges as people who are vaccinated. People will freak out. But at the end of the day, it's just science. It's not comparable to car accidents. Sorry, Glenn and others. You are a walking threat to me if you're not vaccinated. Therefore, I shouldn't have to fly with you. I shouldn't have to take buses with you, be in busy things with you. And frankly, why should vaccinated people who have been responsible have to forever and ever wear masks and do all these things? I wanted your thoughts on what is the end game here? What should Biden do?
It's interesting because when you talked about, like in the very beginning, that one of our biggest problems is that every state has had a different response. And so there's really no getting a hold of something when obviously we could just cross from one state to another. And that is something that is just fundamentally in our Constitution is the way it is. Like, unfortunately, to some people, we are the United States. And so there are certain things that it's like, it is tricky when you start looking at like what the federal government can do as far as shutting down and stuff like that. It does get tricky from a constitutional standpoint. But this has been a disaster from start to finish. But again, if we had healthcare, if we had there's a lot of things that our federal government could have been doing all along that would mitigate a lot of the problems that we're having. But some of it is law and some of it is just, they really don't care. That's what I just think they really don't care. And it's pathetic, really. That's what I think.
And by the way, our Constitution's kind of malleable, if you haven't noticed, because for 20 years we've been dropping bombs and going to war without congressional authority. So,
I also interviewed several constitutional scholars for these articles that I've written on the pandemic and sort of what can we do. And look, Congress has commerce authority. Now, let's just start with, you're right. The law is whatever any 5 justices say it is. So, it is very malleable.
Yeah.
But traditionally, Congress has had this very broad commerce authority to regulate interstate commerce. And in the 30s, there was a case, Wickard v. Filburn, where a farmer sued a wheat farmer sued because the federal government had said you can't grow more than X amount of wheat during this season. Now, that was from part of the Agricultural Adjustment Act that I talked about earlier. This response to the Great Depression to stabilize prices. And the court found that in the aggregate, if the farmer were growing a little extra wheat for his family and then putting the rest on the market, if everybody did that in the aggregate, it would affect the price of wheat. And therefore, it is within Congress's power to regulate that. It is very expansive, the Commerce Clause. We could shut down business for a period of time in this country easily. We could require that, businesses, in order to access businesses, you have to wear a mask or be vaccinated. Like, this is within the powers of Congress. Now, the president on his own has very limited authority. But with Congress, and Biden's got a Democratic Congress, he's got a Democratic Senate, we could act. We could do a lockdown. That's not out of the question. So it's pretty frustrating that we're not at least looking into it.
And Jen, also, I don't have kids, but don't you have to be vaccinated to go to school? You have to be vaccinated against certain things.
Yeah, but they don't. But for example, they can't require. They haven't required flu shots every year. And again, I am not anti-vax. Like my kid's vaccinated, my husband's vaccinated. But I'm just saying, there's certain things that are just sort of different about this than other sterility vaccines in terms of that, because this is something that is going to need boosters and is going to need to be a regular thing. So I don't know how it will be, how this will be enforced without crossing over into authoritarian. And I think that that's one of the things. And I saw somebody in the comments saying they're not anti-vax, they're anti-mandate. And that's this is where I tend to be very libertarian. So it's hard for me because like I said, we're vaccinated, but that's.
No, I'm not for a mandate. As I said, I'm not going to force you to put something in your body.
Right.
But if you don't want to do it, I think you should. If it were me, President Sheridan, God forbid, or governors or mayors, I would say you cannot enter these arenas, these transport, and period.
That is happening. That is happening. Like for concerts and stuff like that.
I would support a vaccine mandate.
I think that in America, I'm not against it on the morality. Also because, as I just pointed out to Jen, if the certain things as a child, you have to be vaccinated or you cannot enter a school. That is under the basis of we do not think it should be allowable for anybody to spread illness to others. So it's the same concept here. But I think in America, if that happened, it would be a new civil war, which I don't particularly think is.
Well, there are people that opt out of getting vaccines for whatever reason. Like you can, and public schools always have that thing where you can opt out for either medical or religious reasons. So the school district will require it, but they do allow an opt-out. So therefore it can't be considered a mandate. And right. I think that is something that is different. So when you are a private venue owner and you're having a concert, you can require everybody that's coming there to have their vaccination card. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think for the government to do it, or for municipals, for schools, for stuff like that, if you don't offer an opt-out, I think that's where it starts to get a little fuzzy for people.
But I think, to me, split the baby and say, you don't want to get vaccinated? Fine. But you're going to be essentially separated from society. I'm sorry to say, but you will not be able to do things other people do. It's your freedom not to do it. You guys could move to your own little unvaccinated island if you want. But if you choose that your freedom is more important than the public good, then you can't enter or travel on spaces with other Americans, period. I want to go ahead, Walker.
I was going to say, one of the epidemiologists that I spoke with a while ago said, that when you have a large percentage of the population that's vaccinated and you have a large percentage of the population that isn't vaccinated, you are putting sort of maximum selective pressure, maximum pressure on that virus to select for, ways to get around that vaccine. That's, look, it's a risk. I think the first place we start is with a national lockdown, where a paid lockdown, pay people to stay home, get the spread under control, ramp up vaccination efforts. If we can't vaccinate enough, I would be in favor of of requiring it, at least requiring it to be able to go into a business or go out, as you said, this is a national crisis. It's a big national crisis. It's killing people. I mean, killed my friend's dad.
Yeah. Killed my neighbor. Yeah, killed my neighbor.
This is not, this isn't.
I think everybody knows somebody that dies from COVID at this point.
It feels almost like the libertarian, response, the anti, any federal action response is it's very academic and not a productive way in the face of very real suffering and very real carnage. And I think people who work in emergency rooms, those are the voices that we should be hearing.
I wanted to take a U-turn before we ended. And by the way, besides the Afghanistan breaking news, cringeworthy breaking news that The View is going to try Condoleezza Rice as Meghan McCain's replacement. I guess there's a rotating Republicans to.
Oh my!
to test Republicans to fill in for Meghan McCain. So if you didn't think it could get worse than Meghan McCain, I give you mushroom clouds.
So now they're going from daughter of war criminal to actual war criminal.
Right.
This is okay. Well, I just wanted to make sure we're.
But Whoopi makes it okay. But I wanted to move on. No, I'm not joking. That's out. That Condoleezza Rice is going to guest host, I guess. But I wanted to turn to a completely different subject, and this might trigger people too. But I got to tell you, Walker and Jen, I've been out there for 6 years, but specifically, I'd say the last 6 months, covering mass homelessness, mass evictions that were happening already despite the moratorium, cover up after cover up, Flint, Breonna Taylor's murder. I mean, real news. And while I was out there, I would turn on my phone and see, the Real Housewives of the Left and this other reality TV drama between certain hosts and YouTube channels. And I call it, Survivor, who's the last progressive standing, real progressive standing. So I've already said my piece about that. People don't like it. It's very interesting that all the people online that love to declare everybody and their mother sellouts cannot be challenged whatsoever. You're punching down, this, that, or the other thing. But I wanted to ask you, I don't get it because I've been covering Amazon workers unionizing or trying to unionize in New York. I covered a big strike gathering of coal miners striking from Alabama. They came up to the city outside BlackRock. Now we got Nabisco workers striking. I interviewed them. You got Starbucks workers trying to unionize in Buffalo. I mean, for literally over a decade, there was not one major strike in America. For over a decade, there was not major union drives. Now, I don't want to overstate it, but now you have them popping up throughout the country. I don't see as many videos on this from progressives. I don't see many articles. Corporate media is not going to cover it, but I'm not being sarcastic. I barely see that. I asked these people criticize me, please point me to your favorite channel and all their videos on this. Because to me, a lot of folks are rightly pissed off at the squad and others. They're not fighting hard enough, this and that. But now you have workers just taking charge. But there's very little coverage of that. I wonder why.
It's very interesting because it's not as sexy and it doesn't get as many clicks, obviously. But
it will just actually partially uncorrupt the country.
Yeah, no, that's not important. We need to worry about clicks. But I think that there's a lot of problems here. I think that all of these people that are screaming in their little echo chamber, which is just ridiculous at this point, if they would take that energy that they're using to go after other content creators and criticize who is and isn't a sellout, if they actually took that energy and did something. So it's like they claim they're all about direct action and they're against electoral politics. But yet all these people do is sit around and bitch about electoral politics and take no direct action. And yes, that's nice that people went to a Medicare for All rally and a march and you had good speakers and so on and so forth. That's really great. But none of these people, see, when I say these people, let me clarify, I'm not speaking about Black people. I need to obviously clarify that because at one point that is, I'm a racist and with that. By these people, I'm talking about people that are thwarting progressive action in any way by just sitting around and complaining all the time and not doing anything about it. So we try to cover actual substantive stuff. I mean, yeah, we have nonsense too, but can I do a plug? Tonight we're having Jolie Fisher come on talking about union issues for SAG after elections. They're trying to get healthcare. So we actually do an uplifting labor segment on our show. So, I mean, I just think that these people are in it for the wrong reasons. And this was something that I commended Tim Black for pointing out. And it's something that I do. We are not all in this for the same reasons. Why you do what you do, Jordan, is not the same reason that most of those people are doing what they're doing. And so it's hard to come to a meeting of the minds when we're not even in this for the same reasons. So I think that you can only really count on the people that are on your mission that are in this for the right reasons. And that's just what it is. And some of those people are just pot stirrers and not muckrakers. And it's unfortunate.
And Walker,
I think there's a massive problem of media literacy in this country.
One second, Walker. I wanted to point out, because I just pointed out what I've been covering. I mean, you cover a lot of non-sexy, non-clickbaity things, redistricting, pension scams. A lot of the things you cover at the Daily Post are way more important then who's the most pure progressive? But, don't go viral. And that's because you're not in this for clicks and entertainment. You're in this to actually break critical information that might affect people's lives. So I don't know. I've been puzzled as I'm out there and you're hearing all these people bitching that there's not enough action and that these progressive legislators aren't doing anything. Yet when workers are doing it, all of these people have massive platforms. And if they start pushing their audience to contribute to mutual aid, get out there with the strikers, if safe and healthy, to work with the strikers, maybe to create your own community economic protest of some sort. Look, it just doesn't make sense to me.
I pride myself on covering the least sexy stories that I can find. But yeah, look, I think there's a big problem with media literacy where what the kind of work that I'm doing is not the same as some podcaster getting mad about, their favorite politician to sort of target. It's definitely not even in the same realm. And if you can't distinguish between that, then, I don't really, I don't know what to say. I don't know what the solution is, because we can keep covering stories that are important and people can, some people will read them, but if, at the end of the day, I don't know, man. It's hard for me to formulate here. It's frustrating. I'm frustrated. My least favorite comments are the ones like a story that'll take me a month or so. The comments will be yeah, I know they're all corrupt.
Right. I get that on Flint all the time. Yeah, didn't we kind of know this? No.
Yeah, actually, I do think you didn't know the details of this. And if you did, then why the hell did I bother doing, spending all this time talking to experts, getting, what the hell? Those are and I don't want to Streisand myself here where now every comment I'm going to get on Twitter is I know, but it's just, there's a cynicism out there that is very, I think, counterproductive. And
I disagree. I don't think it's cynicism anymore. I think it's nihilism, because I think cynicism. Right. I think cynicism is a good thing. You should have cynicism about a lot of things. But if your skepticism,
exactly. That's what I was going to say. Skeptic, not cynic.
I think some cynicism is warranted. Cynicism, like I said, I don't buy it that we're completely out of Afghanistan.
However, yes, warranted, sure. But when your entire thing just becomes when you just shit on everything, yeah, you're probably going to be right a lot, because a lot of what's going on is just absolutely terrible. So you'll be right. If you're cynical about everything, you'll be right a lot of the time. But the times that you're wrong really matter. The times that you're not right, the times that your cynicism is unproductive and hurts any chance of doing something positive, that's bad. So yeah, I guess what I'd like to say is, to people watching this is don't answer on my threads with, yeah, I know.
It's rude.
You don't know. And if you did know, then why didn't you write the story in the first place? Please just take in what people who are reporting on the unsexy things are saying. Read it, formulate your own mind, make up your own mind about it, but don't just, and don't equate it to people who sell you outrage porn for clicks and money on.
Well, I think the most important point about this, and why I brought it up, Jen, is to me, it doesn't matter to me if you dem enter, you dem exit, if you love the squad, hate the squad. I don't care. I mean, I think it's kind of you shouldn't be all or nothing. You should take things case by case. If politicians do bad, you could criticize them, demand more. If they do something good, frankly, none of these channels are pointing out the only reason we have a 3.5 trillion reconciliation package possibly is Bernie Sanders, who they've called the sellout. And by the way, is it Medicare for all? No, but there's a lot of things in there that progressives used to say they wanted. Universal pre-K, free community college, expanding Medicare. There's provisions in there for undocumented immigrants to, legalize status. There's a lot of great things in there. Biden had very little to do with it. It was Bernie. I don't see those channels covering that. I don't see those channels even pointing out, not sending them flowers, because people are saying, well, Jordan, you're telling us to praise the squad. No, but if you've been rightfully criticizing them for not 8 months that they're not doing anything, and then they're all now, at least publicly, threatening as a block to block legislation, sure, you could say, I'll believe it when I see it. But why is it like you're a sellout if you just point out they're currently doing what you've demanded they do? I don't understand that.
I think it's the same as the people with the anti-vax thing. It's like they're holding on to their position for the sake of holding on to their position. And they do this really in regards to anything having to do with Democrats and anything having to do with electoral politics. The same group of people that will sit there and call someone a sellout and say, oh, well, electoral politics is garbage. Then stop following, quite honestly. We really don't need you.
Well, it comes down to ideology.
That's what it is. Right. That's the problem.
What's
and I think
ideology, right?
They don't have one. And for the most part, and when we had people on our show, I'm not going to give credit where it's not due, and they're right. They might have righteous anger about what they're angry about, but they don't know what to do with it. So they're pretty hapless. And now you've got people that are hapless, but have fairly sizable platforms, dragging a whole bunch of other hapless people along with them, instead of really trying to encourage people to do something. And I see that locally. Well, right. And that's why we are big proponents of always local. If everybody served locally, honestly, that would help a lot. If the amount of people that are sitting around and bitching about other content creators that the squads are sellouts, if those people would actually maybe, I don't know, do a clothing drive, do a school supply drive, go clean up something, go clean up a park, but they don't. They sit there like little online warriors as if they're something so strong and fierce, when in fact they live in a very small little fiefdom of the universe.
My whole point in bringing this up, Jen and Walker, is, okay, whatever. I don't agree with you. I know this word isn't allowed anymore in progressive politics. There's a thing called nuance. Not all things are mutually exclusive. You can want to do direct action and focus 75% of your time on that. But if there's a good candidate like Nina Turner, I'll support her. Okay, she's running as a Democrat, so be it. But you could say, I want to build a third party, but if there is a good candidate that happens to be running as a Democrat, in most cases, because there's no other choice, they can't run. Right. MPP doesn't have ballot access. Green Party doesn't have ballot access. They'll lose by 50 points if they run as an independent. Go ask Tim Canova that. My whole point in bringing this up is, right now we actually do have an opportunity. People have selective amnesia. Bernie was on the 5-yard line of possibly becoming the Democratic nominee. So if he would have changed a few things, I think he could have even counteracted what came with the Obama and the establishment. But putting that aside, right now, you have workers, after hibernating for 40 years, organizing major strikes, organizing major union drives, not of like lemonade stands. You're talking Amazon workers in New York right now are filing complaint after complaint with the National Labor Relations Board. You're talking Amazon workers in New York right now are another unsexy thing, are fighting to change the Weingarten rules, which might put you to sleep, but are very important. Weingarten rules basically are for union workers, not non-union workers, that ensure them that if they're called in by HR, they could come with a witness, normally another coworker. Well, non-union workers don't have that. So when you have Amazon HR routinely bringing in 20-somethings afraid for their job, they are putting fear into those workers. They are threatening those workers. So there's a lot of good things happening right now. Nabisco strike started in Portland. Within 2 weeks, it was all over the country. So if we all want to, go into fetal position with our thumbs up our asses, and just declare everything for naught and everything hopeless, then why even watch? Why even be involved? Just drink some whiskey, watch 90 Day Fiancé, and call it a day. I'm saying to people who actually still care about accomplishing things, right now, there's a lot of actual direct action going on with workers, with people supporting those workers, and you can get involved. And I've always said, the flag's right behind me. You could focus all you want on AOC, Bernie. I'm not saying they're perfect. I've criticized both. The donors run the country. It's the United Corporations of America. If you threaten the donors, talking civil disobedience, direct action, if you threaten their bottom line, you might have some change quicker than you think. Because the donors don't care about blue or red. They care about green. So I just hope, I don't understand that there's a real inconsistency and disconnect here between people screaming at politicians that they're not doing anything, but kind of ignoring massive workers' revolt at this point.
Because that's not sexy, doesn't get clicks, right?
Well, I was going to say the frustrating part about this is that we can go on and on and on and talk about it, but at the end of the day, some shit poster on YouTube will like clip it and be like, I can't believe that they're, look at these crazy people, and like their audience would be like, oh yeah, sellouts, and like it's just exhausting. And you know what? That shit is boring. Above everything else, it's fucking boring. You bore me. It's like the comments aren't interesting. All these free thinkers who are so radical, and they all think the same things. They're so individual, yet they all think and talk the same way. Fuck all of you. Like, Jesus Christ. And I know
by you people, you're not referencing any sort of racial group. I want to just always clear that up, because I'm just getting all
people out there who are like, it's a similar profile to everyone. It's got like a flower, a free Assange in the profile, like, and the comments are all like, well, if you shouldn't have voted for Biden. You know what? Fuck off. Like, you think anything would be different? Like, Jesus Christ, it's just it's infuriating. And I know that response isn't going to win anybody over, but I'm not, but like, I don't care. You're fucking fringe. Get the fuck out of my feed. Like well, Jesus fucking Christ. It's just boring, man.
At the end of the day, I think we, as we close it down here, I think us three have something in common. We generally have never played for clicks, whether it be politically. Jen, I mean, you could have been more sexy for office.
Hey, I think I'm pretty sexy, but I'm just saying.
Well, my point is, you could have stood out by saying crazy shit or been more extreme, but you were focused on local community issues in Florida. You also had the handicap of running during a pandemic. You might have done better if you could have campaigned normally. But I think none of us really have gotten into this to play for clicks. And ironically enough, I barely pay attention to it because my Twitter has been suppressed for years. But the more I've been speaking like this, my Twitter following has been going up. And I've noticed that some loudmouths on YouTube, when they go on other shows or whatever, their views are going down. So I don't really, and I'm never going to play to clicks. I've told my audience, listen, if you're looking for someone to validate your views 100% of the time, go watch Fox News. That's the Fox News audience. That's the right-wing audience. If you want to watch, basically, if you want to be fed what you believe 1,000% of the time, this is not for you. And it's a disservice, by the way, to have that mentality, but so be it. If you want to watch, there's plenty of channels for you. But at the end of the day, I think what's going on right now, and why I brought it up, was not to pick a fight. I think it's holding back the progressive movement. Because imagine these channels and these Twitter accounts with such large megaphones, if they had these workers striking on, if they had these Amazon workers on routinely, if they showed up to some of these events, if they were directing their audience to mutual aid funds or whatever the workers needed, it might not only help those workers, but spark the next domino, the next workers' strike, the next so-and-so.
So the worst thing you can do is tell people there's no hope to do anything. That is the worst thing. If you have a platform, you have a responsibility, because the fact is we are not too far gone. We can still fix this. We can. It's bad. It's bleak. The outlook is terrible. I'm depressing at parties when I'm there, it's like, but the fact of the matter is that it is still possible to salvage what we have and make it better. And frankly, like, you don't want to see this collapse. Like if it collapses. Like people have this like, I guess, sort of romanticized vision of what happens if the country like falls apart. Like it's not romantic at all. Like it's violent, it's brutal. People die. People continue to die. Like it's bad. Like we can salvage this. We have to. It comes down to what is your ideology. If you are fundamentally grounded in we need to make things better, then cynicism shouldn't enter your fucking vocabulary. Like you just, people can make a difference. Collective action can make a difference. These strikes that you're talking about, that's huge. That is the first step. Labor action was what preceded the progressive move, like progressive era in politics. We can change this. It's going to take work, and we're going to lose. And first, we're going to lose more than we win. We're going to lose so much more than we win. But you know what? Buck up. Strap in and get ready, because at a certain point, you won't. At a certain point, you will win.
And I also
Things
want to
will
point out.
change.
I also want to point out. Oh, sorry. I also want to point out. I want to point out before we wrap. This is where the elites want you. They want you to be basically on a kamikaze mission to nowhere. They want you. It's also called divide and conquer. They want you to be hopeless. They want you to be fighting each other. They want you to be, basically, instead of focusing on them, largely focusing on each other. But I will remind people, because I myself got caught up into it. I'm a journalist, but I'm also a human. I think a lot of people, not because they're naive, but just because who wouldn't get caught up at those Bernie rallies in 2016? Revolution and the energy. And I think a lot of people wrongly assumed that we could make radical change in this country extremely quickly. They maybe forgot the whole corrupt country we live in it wasn't built overnight. This is brick by brick, decade by decade. Union regulations, unions being busted, trade, offshoring of jobs, white flight. I mean, you name it. The shrinking, the loosening of rules on money and politics. This was always going to be an uphill climb. Bernie could be president right now. We would not have Medicare for all yet. That's just the truth. It would be a battle royale. So I think people, because things were rigged, Bernie lost, or the squad got in and they're not doing what you think, you're kind of under the assumption that we would have gotten where we wanted if these politicians would have done X or would do X now. And the truth is, I'm not talking about incrementalism. I'm talking, it's not, we all want immediate change. It's not going to happen that immediately without the outside stuff we're talking about right now. Politicians are only half the picture, in my view. The other half is us making the making the corporations less comfortable, striking to the point where the media has to cover it. The media has covered not enough, but some of these strikes. So to me, at the end of the day, we could all keep a post-mortem on forced to vote. What is it going to be? 3 years later, 5 years later, we're still talking about it. I was for it. I still agree with trying to leverage your vote for things.
But are you still holding your breath, Jordan? You still holding your breath on that one?
I'm not fixating on it. I also think they should be forcing the vote on $15 minimum wage, which I think if they actually vote as a block and are cutthroat about it, they could get a $15 minimum wage through. But at the end of the day, we were not going to get everything we wanted right away. So instead of venting about that, because your venting is righteous, I understand you're angry. I understand you're upset. I'm upset too. I'm out in the country seeing this misery and corruption up close. But you could choose to take that justified and righteous indignation and just fight each other for the next 5 years until we've done the important task of filtering out who's not really progressive. But then what? What then? So if you want to criticize politicians, have at it. But I think we should all be really, really focused on these strikes, mutual aid, the organizing. Because I'll tell you what the New York Amazon workers doing is very meticulous, very well thought out, and so far successful. They've gotten almost 2,000 signatures.
I think it's important, though. I want to just say this. I think it's important, when it's almost like talking about certain people as if you and they are sort of in a similar field. And I think people really need to distinguish between what is journalism and what is just content. And that is something that we have lost our way entirely. And that has to do with, I think, the fact that mainstream media is now completely just content and there really isn't any news anymore. And that's just what the crap that people are used to eating. But, to think that people in other platforms with huge platforms are going to necessarily have the integrity of a journalist or have the priorities of putting forth good information. That's just not, I just don't think that that's realistic. I think that people are in this for different reasons. Unfortunately, all platforms are on one thing, but yet they're not all the same. I would just really urge people to understand the difference between what is journalism and what is just content. And you can tell because if you watch a show and all they do is criticize what everyone else is doing, but they don't actually do anything, you need to watch different material. That's what I would say.
Thank you, both of you. We went from COVID to the left to Condoleezza Rice, all in 2 hours. Any parting thoughts before we go, Walker?
Thanks for having me on. Look, it's frustrating to deal with just the barrage of shit that is out there, but the work that you're doing is great. Keep doing it. It's important. Jen, it's good to see you again. Like your show. We'll have to do another episode.
We actually have real journalists on our show, so that's why I know you guys.
You do, and you talk about things that I like to talk about, like redistricting, which is
very sexy stuff.
Totally so sexy, But yeah, no, it's thank you both, and we'll talk soon. And
all right,
Jordan,
guys.
Congratulations again.
If I don't plug the show, he'll kill me. Jordan, he'll kill me. And So guys, check out Generational Change with a J. We're on YouTube. We're also on Spotify and iTunes. And I don't normally do that, but I literally just got a text from him telling me to do that.
Definitely check Generational Change out. They do good stuff. And yeah, I think that's another thing. Honestly, we all have to, I think progressive media is often on their own little island. People go live at the same time. A lot of people doing the same content over or not elevating other content. So glad to have you both on, and we'll keep in touch.
Thanks, Jordan. Bye, Walker.
Peace,
Take
folks.
Care.
All right. Thank you. Choo, choo, choo.